British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has told Russia to step back from a military disaster and is accusing the Kremlin of effectively holding a gun to Ukraine's head. During a visit to Kiev, he promised continued support for Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia's President Putin is accusing the West of ignoring his demands over security. He warned the defence alliance NATO against allowing Ukraine to join. The Manchester United footballer Mason Greenwood has been further arrested on suspicion of sexual assault and threats to kill. British police initially arrested the 20-year-old Premier League star on Sunday afternoon on suspicion of the rape and assault of a young woman. And the World Health Organization says the vast amount of waste being generated by the response to the pandemic is a threat to the environment and to human health.
Tracking the day's major developments. We have a big number we're keeping an eye on. Here it is, 40. That's 40 states and territories that are now reporting, Dr. Ashton, that COVID-19 case averages are falling. However, health officials warn we're still not out of the woods. We've got case levels remaining much higher than previous national surges. And Alaska, by the way, is leading new cases per capita. Still work to be done, of course.
Yep. All right. We all know it is February 1st. That is the beginning of Black History Month. And Dr. Jen, we know it's not just about COVID-19 deaths, but you also have some statistics about the disproportionate health risks.
Yep. It's so important, you guys, in medicine and science to look at different populations differently. It's not one size fits all. And nowhere is that more clear than in some of the disproportionate health risks that are faced by Black people. So just a few examples. Diabetes, 60% more common in Blacks versus whites. Black adults, 3 times more common to die of an asthma attack than whites. Still, in this day and age, strokes killing 4 times more middle-aged Black people compared to white people. And then African-American women, almost 4 times more likely to die during pregnancy than non-Black women. So there is a lot of work to be done here when it comes to health, medical issues facing Black people.
Thank you for highlighting that today, Dr. Ashton. It is an absolute honor to have our next guest with us. A 4-star general, yes, that's impressive enough. He's the first African-American Air Force Chief of Staff, making him the first African-American to lead any branch of the United States military services.
And yes, now joining us live from the Pentagon is Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General C.Q. Brown, Jr. General, thank you for being with us. Welcome to GMA3. Congratulations. And yes, I'm sure it's an honor, of course, to be the first, but it's a long time coming and there's a lot of work to do. What do you hope to accomplish in this historic role?
Well, first of all, you know, I think when I really think about the opportunity and the great honor to have this position is, you know, what I really want to accomplish is really pave the way for those that come behind me. And growing up, and I've always thought about you only aspire to be what you can see. And hopefully, by me being in this position, I'll inspire many young people to open doors for not just in the military, but just really across the country to be able to do things to be in great positions just like this.
And to that point and to that message, you want people to come on board and you're trying to diversify your force there. And part of that was a video you put out, a recruiting video. And I want to show a portion of it and give people an idea of your message and your personality a little bit. Let's take a listen to this.
When I'm flying, I put my helmet on, my visor down, my mask up. You don't know who I am. Whether I'm African American, Asian American, Hispanic, white, male or female. You just know I'm an American airman kicking your butt.
Oh, I love it. I want to join the Air Force after watching that. Now, understand the story.
We'll sign you up.
Well, now, understand you were behind writing that yourself. You kind of had some downtime. Why was that the way you wanted to go, that message? Maybe it's just your personality, but also what kind of impact and feedback did you get in terms of recruiting after that spot aired?
Well, it's something that, you know, when I was a captain, I did an interview for Air Force Times, and I had the same kind of thought process, and I was sharing the story with the director, because we were recruiting doing some other recruiting commercials, and later in the day, they said, hey, we'd like to tape what you said earlier today. And I told them, well, I need to write it down, so make sure I get it right, because it's going to be on tape. But I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from many around the country that they're in uniform and not in uniform, and from other services as well about the impact. And I think it does help recruiting the fact that we really want to diversify the force, and we just want many of our young people that come into our military to have the opportunity to reach their full potential, no matter their background.
You talk about diversifying, and look, 2%, I believe, and you correct me if I have that number wrong, but I think 2% of Air Force pilots are black. And you talk about it still, you have to see it to believe that you can be it. And even you, in the military, you've told stories about you parking in a particular spot, and folks thought that, hey, that's for the commander here, and you had to tell them, yes, I am the commander. And being with other white pilots, people would still come up with you and say, hey, are you a pilot? Because you don't look like the rest. How do you now go after that 2% number and get it much, much higher than it is right now?
Well, there's several things that one is me just being in this position and be able to talk to you today, and hopefully a young person sees me on your show today and maybe inspires them. By the same token, it's how we engage at lower levels. And what I mean by that, at middle school and high school, and talking to young people and providing them opportunity to experience flight. I mean, the whole reason I became a pilot is because I actually, between my sophomore and junior year of college, I got to ride in fly an Air Force trainer, and from there on, I go, I think I want to do this. And so it's how we inspire those young people with these opportunities in aviation, whether they come into the Air Force or any other services or just go into the commercial aviation piece. It's really the aspect of inspiring them and giving them the opportunity to experience it.
And General, finally, I want to bring up, you were named an honorary member of the Tuskegee Airmen last year. Can you talk a little bit about what that day meant to you?
Well, it's, the Tuskegee Airmen have been a long-time inspiration for me, my Air Force career. And to be, named an honorary Tuskegee Airman and get the red jacket, but it's also not only that for me to be a role model for others, but it's really those that were a role model for me. And, just this past week, just over a week ago, Charles McGee passed away, and I have the opportunity to attend his services here next week. They're all an inspiration, and hopefully, just by me being an honorary Tuskegee Airman, I can be an inspiration to those that come behind me as well.
Well, General, thank you for your time, but also, most importantly, for your service. We absolutely appreciate having you, and we certainly hope you'll come back and visit with us here on GMA3, all right?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, Dr. Ashton here, and answering your questions. Up first here, Dr. Ashton, why are some children escaping severe side effects of Omicron?
Well, first, let's step back and remember what we've learned about the way this virus behaves in the pediatric population. Overall, even from the onset, they were at lower risk of severe illness, disease, complications, and death. That doesn't mean zero risk, but lower. Now, 2 years in, and especially as we're tracking Omicron, we're finding that the overall risk of hospitalization in the pediatric age group is less than 1.5%. Now, if that's your child, it doesn't matter. That's a big deal, obviously. But it is very, very low. We don't really understand why. Maybe they're getting a lower viral exposure. Maybe their immune systems process this virus differently. Whatever it is, it's good news, certainly. We'll take it. But again, low risk does not mean zero risk.
All right, next question. How do I know if I'm getting all the nutrition I need?
You guys, this is the holy grail. This is the $1 million question. It's very hard to know. Now, I'll tell you a quick story. When I got my master's in nutrition, we had to do a food diary for 3 days to see if we were getting the proper or recommended amount of nutrition. I went into it very smug, thinking I eat pretty well. I'm going to do great on this. Very type A kind of person. Boy, was I surprised. Just based on the recommendations, what I would normally eat in 3 days didn't even come close to what's recommended. So first recommendation I would give is do one of these food diaries. Number two, see how you feel. There are some things you can test by blood, not a lot, unfortunately. And if you have any chronic illness, ask your healthcare provider whether nutrition can play a role. But we need to focus a lot more on the input that our food, our diet, our nutrition has on our overall health and wellness, for sure.
Your diary better now? Would you pass?
A little better. I mean, I had nowhere to go but up. It was really not good.
Wow, all right. Keep your questions coming to the expert on nutrition over there, apparently. Dr. Ashton on her Instagram at Dr. J. Ashton.
And I want to bring in Chief Innovation Officer at Boston Children's Hospital, ABC News medical contributor Dr. John Brownstein, for a little more on this. Dr. Brownstein, thanks so much for being here. What do you think the timeline looks like after Pfizer applies for this emergency use authorization, and what impact could this have?
Yeah, well, good morning, Diana. Great to be back with you again.
Likewise.
Yeah, I think that we have a great opportunity to see the vaccine roll out now in those under fives. You know, there are so many parents that have been incredibly anxious. So we'll potentially see this authorization application submitted, and potentially by the end of February, that authorization for those 2-dose series. Now, we still don't know. There's still a lot that needs to be done in terms of the regulatory process. And we have to remember, they've expanded the trials to 3-dose. They started with 2 doses of that 3 micrograms, 1/10 the adult dose, but that wasn't shown to produce a really significant immune response. So now we have these new trials. It's possible we'll see, authorization for the 2-dose and then potentially that 3rd dose to get kids some level of immunity. We have to remember, there are millions of kids that have tested positive throughout this pandemic, so getting that protection is going to be super helpful. At the same time, we have to take the necessary steps to show this vaccine is safe and effective, because we really haven't rolled out, even in the over 5s, that well yet. So we have to really make the case for the vaccine, and with the data, letting the data drive the decision right now.
Is it possible that we end up getting feedback? Because it seems like the younger the age group, the more the debate starts stirring about boosters and vaccines and so on. So do you think there could be a debate over whether vaccines are necessary for this young age group?
Absolutely, because, as we know that, the risk for kids, as you go younger is lower. At the same time, kids do develop severe consequences of this virus. But if the 2 doses is not producing the immune response that you would want to show real protection, there will be a debate. Is it worth getting my kids vaccinated now, not with no real significant data? So I think there's going to be a debate. On one hand, you have parents super anxious, wanting to get their kids vaccinated. On the other hand, there are parents that really are not convinced yet. And we have not yet seen, that sort of uptake in the 5 to 12-year-olds. That's only about 20 to 25% of kids in that group are fully vaccinated. It will continue to go lower as parents are more concerned about their younger kids.
Now, 38 states are reporting a decrease in average daily COVID cases. Finally, there is a lot of talk now about COVID turning into an endemic rather than a pandemic. So, 1, is that true? And 2, can you explain what that really means?
Yeah, no, I know this, this endemic word is something that people keep talking about. It's really this idea that the virus becomes part of the respiratory mix of infections. We have, cold and flu season. We have other coronaviruses. This coronavirus will be part of that, and we'll deal with it and learn to live with it. But we have to remember, we have still yet vaccinated billions of people across the globe. We're still dealing with the surge, so we're not there yet. But I do think we have to head towards a place that we're learning to live with this virus. We have vaccines, therapies, testing, and I think ultimately we'll have better vaccines down the pike. But we also have to know how to off-ramp. I think that's going to be a real challenge. How do we start to remove masks? How do we start to gather indoors? I think we have to begin to off-ramp to that normal life, because we may deal with a surge in the future, and those restrictions will have to come back, and people will have to be able to embrace them. So I think, we're heading there, but, obviously we're still dealing with substantial transmission in the community. So, we're not quite to a point where I think, we can call, anywhere near victory on this pandemic.
All right. Dr. Brownstein, always great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now to that breaking news from NFL quarterback Tom Brady. After days of speculation, Brady is now officially announcing he is retiring from football after 22 seasons. Brady made that announcement in a post on social media, writing, "I have loved my NFL career, and now it is time to focus my time and energy on other things that require my attention." And let's talk a little bit more about this with ABC News contributor LZ Granderson. LZ, thanks so much for coming on. Why do you think he chose to post this now? I mean, the past few days have just been full of speculation. Even his dad came out against the rumors, and now here's Brady saying, you know what? I am retiring.
That's a fantastic question, and I'm sure at some point he's going to relay the answer as to the timing of it all. I would hate to think, and I know this is the antithesis of the industry that I'm in and that you're in, Diane, but I would hate to think the breaking news of him retiring days ago forced him to come out with a statement now before he was ready to. And the only reason why I would hate to think that is because if he wanted more time to contemplate and there was an opportunity through that deliberation to have yet one more season of Tom Brady, it looks like we've lost that opportunity. So that's the only reason why I'm saying that. But, it's a beautiful post. We all know about his 22-year career, the two teams, the championships. The thing that I respect most about Tom Brady is that he's not leaving because he can't play. He's leaving because he wants to do something else. And that is a tremendous way for any athlete to leave, but definitely one who's in a conversation of being the greatest of all time.
And, Robert Kraft just put out a statement on this, singing his praise for Tom Brady and saying, among other things, I have the greatest respect for Tom personally and always will. His humility coupled with his drive and ambition truly made him special. I will always feel a close bond to him and will always consider him an extension of my immediate family. It's interesting, though, LZ, Brady didn't mention the Patriots in his post. Did that surprise you?
Not really. This is about Tom Brady. And while it is true that Tom was a Patriot for much of his career and most of his success came as a Patriot, the reality is that his move to Tampa Bay was about separating his own legacy from the Patriot way and in some ways separating himself from being seen as a Bill Belichick prodigy. And Bill Belichick is considered the greatest coach of all time. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that as he's discussing his own journey, he's staying focused in as much as possible as where he is right now and not where he once was. I don't think that's a slight necessarily. Perhaps we'll see it under more reporting as the days go by. But my initial response to that was he wants to talk about himself and where he is right now in life and not what he's accomplished and think about the past.
But he did spend a lot of time talking to the Buccaneers and not anything there mentioning the Patriots. So I expect we're going to hear a little bit more about that conversation, as you said, as the day goes on.
I think so.
So what do you think? You're understandably saying this is about Tom and what he's done and what's next for Tom Brady. So what do you think is next for Tom Brady and what happens now with the Buccaneers?
Those are two fascinating questions. Tom Brady has spent most of the past two seasons not just trying to make the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a Super Bowl champion and thus separating his legacy from that of the franchise that drafted him, 199, but he's also spent 2 years in a lot of ways sort of reintroducing himself to the public as a person. Remember, outside of the controversies, the various gates, whether it's Deflate Gate, Spy Gate, Strawberry Gate, all the gates that he's had, as well as obviously the MAGA hat and him being able to kind of avoid talking about why that MAGA hat was in his locker, particularly around the time of, as we're looking at the insurrection and his connection to President Trump, he was able to duck all of those conversations and questions. But he has spent 2 years talking about The Man in the Arena, which is a show that he's streaming. He's been a lot more open in terms of where he is via his podcast. And I think what was really telling was that he was willing to acknowledge the position he was in as it pertained to President Trump and the MAGA movement with his joking with President Biden when he visited the White House. Making the reference about a questioned result and, whether or not there would be a recount. That was Tom Brady's attempt to try to distance himself from the MAGA controversy and also introduce himself as a personality. And so I don't see him coaching. I don't see him being some sort of court consultant for a GM position or a quarterback's coach, but I do see him being more involved in media. We know that Peyton Manning and his brother Eli Manning has made a successful transition over. Those were contemporaries of his, as well as Drew Brees has made that transition over into the media side. So I would not be surprised at all if you see Tom get more involved with media, either as a commentary or as someone who is sort of occupying his own space like Peyton is.
So, LZ, 7 Lombardi trophies, 5 Super Bowl MVPs. Does Brady leave as the greatest of all time?
I think it all depends upon what your definition of GOAT is. Now, I'm under the belief that Aaron Rodgers is physically the most talented player to play the position. I'm under the belief that Lamar Jackson and Michael Vick are two of the most dynamic and exciting guys to ever play the position. but no one has come close to winning at the clip of Tom Brady. And so if your definition of greatest of all time is about wins and losses, then absolutely, Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time and one of the greatest athletes of all time. And he, in my opinion, is the greatest team sport underdog story of all time. Venus and Serena Williams are still the overall underdog story, success story, but Tom Brady is right there and is number one when it comes to team success underdog stories for sure.
All right, LZ Granderson, always great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Diane.
And let's bring in Terry Austin, a host and legal analyst at the Law and Crime Network, for more on this. Terry, good morning. What exactly would this plea deal have done, and why is Arbery's family so opposed to it?
Well, first of all, good morning and welcome back, Diane.
Thank you.
This plea deal, I think, was rejected by Judge Wood because partly the family did argue against it. And it is unusual for a judge to reject this type of plea because you have the defendants and you have the prosecution all saying this is fair and this will save time, it will save money. And frankly, 30 years in federal prison is a sentence that is something someone would view as just and fair. But I think the judge really looked at this as it was a heinous crime. It was a hate crime. She did listen to what Wanda Cooper Jones said, and at the end of the day, she just did not think 30 years in federal prison was enough.
So what does this mean now for how this case moves forward?
So they still have an opportunity to say that they are pleading either guilty or not guilty, and that the judge said they need to do by Friday. So they could go to trial, and if they go to trial, it is a big risk for both sides, frankly. And one of the good things about a plea deal, if the judge had accepted it, is that the verdict cannot be appealed. So if they go to trial, they could win or lose, and that verdict could be appealed. So the next thing we'll see is whether or not they're going to plead guilty, and then we'll see what happens.
And meanwhile, jury selection is now underway in the trial stemming from the police raid that killed Breonna Taylor. But the trial isn't actually focused on Breonna Taylor's death. So can you walk us through what this trial is all about?
Well, Brent Hankinson, he is the police officer who is being tried here. And it's not for shooting and killing Breonna Taylor. It's for having shot into the neighbor's home. And the fact that it was basically reckless for him to do so. And it's 3 counts of wanton endangerment of others. And so he's going to trial. It seems like the other 2 officers and Hankinson will also be witnesses at the trial.
All right, Terry Austin, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn now to some encouraging news for parents of young children in the fight against COVID. As early as today, Pfizer could apply for emergency use authorization for its COVID vaccine for those as young as 6 months old. This, as we do see the numbers of cases and hospitalizations going down, but some facilities are still overwhelmed. Maria Villarreal is at a hard-hit hospital in McAllen, Texas, tracking it all. Good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Robin. New data just released by the American Pediatric Association reveals for the first time since Thanksgiving, cases among children are finally dropping. And while health experts are breathing a sigh of relief, in that same breath, they're also warning we're not out of the woods yet.
This morning, according to new reports, Pfizer is preparing to submit a request for its vaccine to be authorized for children as young as 6 months old. According to the Washington Post, Pfizer and its partner BioNTech are expected to submit their data as soon as today. Sources tell the paper for the first time in the pandemic, kids 5 and younger may be able to start receiving a 2-dose course of the vaccine by the end of February. The steps towards vaccinating the youngest Americans comes amid a slowdown in the latest surge, with 38 states reporting a decrease in average daily COVID cases.
Endemic doesn't necessarily mean that the virus is gone or that it's necessarily safe. We may see more variants, we may see more surges. We are moving to a point where we can manage those things without disrupting our lives as much. And that's the mindset we have to get into.
But in many places, like here along the South Texas border, doctors are still battling a surge of Omicron cases, with many expecting mothers coming in to deliver babies and testing positive.
I would say 10 to 15% of the ones that are coming in have COVID.
This mother choosing to quarantine away from her newborn after she tested positive while in labor.
Nowadays, I feel patients are more informed. They say, okay, well, I know I have the virus, and now I know I have to stay clean and isolate myself.
The good news is in this area, vaccine rates are high, especially among the elderly. As for some of those states that are still seeing an increase, there are 5 of them. They are Idaho, Maine, Minnesota, Montana, and Washington. Michael?
All right, thank you so much.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is in Ukraine today on a diplomatic mission, but facing backlash back home, under fire over a new government report on parties during the pandemic lockdown, triggering calls for his resignation. Lama Hassan has the latest for us.
This morning, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson heading to Ukraine amid its growing crisis while facing one of his own back home.
Firstly, I want to say sorry.
The Prime Minister apologizing after the release of a damning report into more than a dozen parties held by his staff during a strict national COVID lockdown, a lockdown he himself had ordered, including some at his own residence inside 10 Downing Street, like this gathering in May 2020.
I'm sorry for the things we simply didn't get right, and also sorry for the way that this matter has been handled.
The report saying there were failures of leadership and judgment by different parts of Number 10 and the Cabinet Office.
To find out that they have not been following the very rules that they have set is disgusting and sickening.
The Prime Minister now under fire from fellow lawmakers.
The Prime Minister took us all for fools. He showed himself unfit for office.
Johnson promising changes to come in his office, but resisting calls to resign.
I understand the anger that people feel. I get it, and I will fix it.
Now, the Metropolitan Police is conducting its own investigation into 12 gatherings with the Prime Minister present at 3 of them. But the police will be poring over more than 500 pages of evidence, including 300 photos, which could take up to a year. The Prime Minister is not out of the woods just yet.
Return now to the carbon monoxide leak at a hotel pool in Ohio that sent more than a dozen people to the hospital. It's under investigation now as we hear the frantic 911 calls from parents watching their children pass out. Alex Perez has the story. Good morning, Alex.
Hey, good morning, George. People who were inside that hotel say they feel very lucky to be alive. They say the incident unfolded very quickly. 1 second, everyone was fine. The next, people were collapsing.
My daughter is 2, and we were just in the pool, and she's she's not very responsive.
Terrifying moments as families were overwhelmed by carbon monoxide captured on this newly released 911 audio.
She is breathing, but she keeps partially passing out. You need to hurry. She is passing out.
Parents, including mom Tiffany Young, panicking as kids passed out at the indoor pool area of this Hampton Inn hotel in Marysville, Ohio. Her 11-year-old daughter, shaken, also desperately calling for help.
Where are they all located at?
In the pool area.
They're in the pool area?
It's hard for me to breathe, and I have a headache.
Brooklyn was one of the 14 patients treated at the hospital, but she has since been released. Now, authorities are investigating how life-threatening levels of carbon monoxide were able to build up to such high levels inside the building. According to a new fire department report obtained overnight by our affiliate WSYX, when crews first arrived at the hotel, the level of carbon monoxide in the pool area was 1,300 parts per million, more than 6 times potentially lethal levels, and throughout the hotel, elevated levels found in every room. Authorities in initial findings suspect a pool heater to be the source. Young spoke by phone with WSYX.
What if we didn't get out of there? What if we passed out in the water with our children? We would have drowned.
And in a statement, the hotel tells us they are cooperating with authorities as they work to pinpoint what exactly caused this buildup of carbon monoxide. Guys?
So frightening. All right, Alex, thank you.
Breaking news this morning, a new bomb threat reported at Howard University. Kenneth Moulton is there in Washington, D.C. with the latest on the FBI investigation after multiple threats target at least 6 historically black colleges and universities. Good morning, Kenneth.
Good morning, Michael. Howard University and 5 other HBCUs dealing with bomb threats this morning. It's the 3rd one in a month for Howard. DC and campus police locking down this historically black college and university, which has gotten the all clear. The FBI and ATF are investigating these bomb threats made to at least 6 HBCUs this morning, yesterday, and weeks earlier. Bowie State in Maryland, Bethune-Cookman in Florida, Delaware State, all targeted. Authorities found no explosive devices, but of course the threats locked down campuses and canceled classes. Federal and local investigators have not gone into a potential motive here, but officials at these schools say it's clear they're being targeted for being historically black institutions. Members of Congress have already asked the FBI for more information about these bomb threats. George.
Okay, Kenneth, thanks very much. We begin with the breaking news overnight. A massive inferno rapidly spread at a North Carolina fertilizer plant. Firefighters battling the blaze were forced to pull back due to fears of an explosion, and mandatory evacuations are underway right now. Steve Osunsami has the latest. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning to you, George. Authorities had to rush families out of their homes overnight with sleeping bags and send them to libraries and other emergency shelters.
We are evacuating the scene. We are evacuating the scene.
There's somewhere between 300 and 600 tons of ammonium nitrate in this facility. The entire building has become consumed by fire and has collapsed in.
North Carolina fire officials this morning say there are 3 times more chemicals here than in the fertilizer plant fire in Texas in 2013 that killed 15 people. So they've told thousands here to leave their homes.
We need folks within a 1-mile radius of this facility to evacuate and to be prepared to remain evacuated for 48 hours.
Even firefighters had to move their equipment a mile away.
Leave any equipment in place. Just leave it in place. We got to evacuate the scene. Leave any equipment on the ground. Just leave it. We'll come back and get it. Leave your truck. Leave your equipment.
The evacuated area includes parts of Wake Forest University, where classes are now canceled today. People working next door to the facility said they started smelling the fire, then saw shooting flames and clouds of black smoke. One neighbor says her house shook from the force of explosions inside the burning plant. There's no word yet on what caused the fire. There's a prison in the area authorities say they're concerned about, and they're also concerned about potential toxic fumes that they say could linger in the air for another 48 hours. Robin?
I want everybody to stay safe. Okay, Steve, thank you.
We're getting at the latest now on the showdown with Russia over Ukraine. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will speak with the Russian foreign minister this morning in the wake of a tense session at the UN Security Council that echoed the Cold War. Our senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell is on the scene in Ukraine. Good morning, Ian.
Yeah, good morning, George. That's right. Tensions around this part of Ukraine in the east of the country are among some of the highest, and that's because we're so close to the Russian border. It's less than 50 miles away from here. But for now, the talking continues to try to de-escalate, with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson meeting together with the Ukrainian president right now, and the Russians saying that they plan to bring up this issue of security guarantees once again on this crucial call today.
A critical day for diplomacy amid ongoing tensions between America and Russia over Ukraine. Secretary of State Blinken speaking with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov today. The State Department saying the Kremlin formally responded to America's security proposals, but this morning, Russia denying that. US and Russian diplomats clashing on Monday at the United Nations over the more than 100,000 Russian troops massing on the Ukrainian border, with the US ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, warning more troops could be on the way.
We've seen evidence that Russia intends to expand that presence to more than 30,000 troops near the Belarus-Ukraine border.
The ambassador stressing the gravity of the situation.
This is the largest, hear me clearly, mobilization of troops in Europe in decades.
So the diplomatic stakes are now higher than ever. Russia denying it plans to invade, and the Biden administration saying it doesn't believe Putin has yet made a firm decision. And on the front lines here, Ukrainian citizens on high alert. Engineers, journalists, parents volunteering with this military reserve unit taking up arms to defend their homeland.
So, you're training to fight for your country.
Yes, for my family, for my city, and of course for my country.
Well, in a sign of how serious the Ukrainians are now taking this, President Zelensky this morning signing a decree ordering an increase in the numbers of people in the armed forces by 100,000. Serious times indeed.
We're going to get the latest now on the American woman charged with leading an all-female battalion of ISIS and plotting to attack targets in the U.S. Allison Fluke-Ekron appeared in court Monday, and our Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas is in Washington with an exclusive interview with one of her former friends. Good morning, Pierre.
George, good morning. The FBI is accusing Allison Fluke-Ekron of being a cold-blooded terrorist who was planning to kill her fellow Americans. And this morning it's clear some members of her own family believe the accusations. Allison Fluke-Ekron making her first appearance in federal court Monday as the FBI moved forward with its case, portraying the 42-year-old mother from Kansas as a fierce ISIS warrior who lived in this battle-ridden area of Syria from 2014 to 2017 before being captured on the battlefield.
This is an extremely unique case and one to really watch. Here in the U.S., we've only had 3 cases of women who traveled to join the Islamic State who've actually returned.
Prosecutors on Monday told a federal judge that Fluke-Ekron's family, including her own mother and father, do not want her to contact them. And a former close friend, speaking exclusively to ABC News, says she warned people years ago that she believed Fluke-Ekron was becoming radicalized.
She was very sympathetic towards the Islamic State and how they were doing the right thing.
Authorities and friends say Fluke-Ekron once led a modest life in Kansas, homeschooling her children. But that several years ago, she left the country, living abroad in Egypt and Turkey. The FBI claims Fluke-Ekron ended up in Syria, where she became a member of ISIS.
This morning, ABC News confirms some documents from the Trump White House turned over to the committee investigating the January 6th attack were torn up and had to be taped back together. Politico first reported in 2018 that aides were often forced to tape up shredded documents due to Trump's habit of ripping up White House records. A statement from the National Archives seems to confirm that report, saying documents sent to the committee, quote, included paper records that had been torn up by former President Trump. It comes as another person close to the Trump administration cooperates with the January 6th investigation. Former Vice President Mike Pence's chief of staff, Mark Short, has now testified before the committee. The news coming just hours after former President Trump admitted he wanted Pence to, quote, overturn the election on January 6th by throwing out some electoral votes.
That's clearly not what the Constitution provides for. He must be kidding.
At a rally in Texas over the weekend, Trump also suggested he would pardon the January 6 rioters if he were back in the White House.
If it requires pardons, we will give them pardons because they are being treated so unfairly.
Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney responding, tweeting, quote, Trump uses language he knows caused the January 6 violence, suggests he'd pardon the January 6 defendants, and admits he was attempting to overturn the election. He'll do it again if given the chance. And this morning, the New York Times reports Trump was more directly involved than previously known in plans to seize voting machines after the election. The plans were conceived by his advisors to get the Justice Department and other agencies to seize the machines to look for fraud. At the rally in Texas, Trump called the prosecutors investigating him radical and racist. A district attorney in Georgia is now asking the FBI for extra security.
守って攻める Z 界高校生タブレットコース高得点の鍵は隙のない知識
High-profile politicians are also under fire. California Governor Gavin Newsom, along with the mayors of L.A. and San Francisco, on the defensive over photos showing them without masks posing with Magic Johnson. Zareen Shaw has the latest for us this morning. Good morning, Zareen.
Good morning, Michael. California Governor Gavin Newsom is under fire again, this time with LA Mayor Eric Garcetti. The two politicians were seen here at SoFi Stadium over the weekend at the Rams 49ers game, not wearing masks, although Garcetti appears to be holding one, both posing with Magic Johnson. LA County rules state people at large events have to wear masks, except when eating or drinking. Newsom defending his actions, saying he was very judicious in the removal of his mask and was simply trying to to be gracious. Other images appear to contradict Newsom's claim that he only took his mask off for a few moments. And you remember, over a year ago, Newsom was seen with several people dining indoors at a very expensive California restaurant, the French Laundry, violating his own guidelines and sparking a movement calling for his removal from office. George.
Okay, Zareen, thanks.
We begin with Myanmar, which remains in turmoil 1 year after a coup overturned the civilian government. People frustrated with military rule lashed out with what they call a silent strike. The largest city of Yangon was oddly quiet Tuesday. Streets were mostly deserted after activists had called on people to take the day off work and stay at home. The military had tried to stop the protests by threatening to arrest and imprison anyone who took part. Myanmar's military ruler broadcast his plea directly to citizens. He called for people to back his regime and end 12 months of chaos.
I urge the people of Myanmar to cooperate with the government to realize peace and stability in this country.
A year ago, the military justified the move with unsubstantiated claims of election fraud. Now its chief says the state of emergency was the only way to protect the fledgling democracy. The military has cracked down on protests, reportedly killing some 1,500 people and detaining more than 11,800 others. The unrest has seen 320,000 residents flee their homes. Many now live in poverty. Japan used the anniversary to criticize the military's deadly crackdown.
Japan strongly condemns the situation in which violence has caused many deaths, despite repeated calls from the international community to end it. We call for restraint in violence and a peaceful solution to restore peace and stability.
The foreign minister also said Japan will cooperate with ASEAN members to provide humanitarian support for people in Myanmar. There were also much more vocal protests in Yangon. People took to the streets before the silent strike in a rallying cry for the resistance. Young people secretly gathered in a district near the center of the city at around 5 a.m. They marched for a short time, calling on others to stay strong against the military. One of their chants, even if you must make sacrifices, take back democracy. The junta has been on edge as the anniversary approached. Footage in central Myanmar on Monday night shows military trucks and police vehicles. They warn people not to join the protests. Myanmar's state-run TV says more than 30 people were detained nationwide during the 7 days up to Monday for failing to comply. Thailand hosts one of Southeast Asia's largest communities of people from Myanmar. Its residents are voicing concerns about their country's situation a year after the coup. In Bangkok, a group of Myanmar people gathered to call for the restoration of democracy. Some stomped on photographs of Myanmar's senior general Min Aung Hlaing and raised 3 fingers in a gesture of protest against the military rule.
We want the world to know that we are still resisting the military rule. We are here today to show defiance on behalf of the people who are still in Myanmar.
Thousands of people from Myanmar escaped to border towns last year amid intensified fighting. Some are still living at a camp near one such border town for safety reasons. A Myanmar woman who has lived for 5 years in the town of Mae Sot in Thailand says she has been closely watching the situation.
I'm worried. I've been in contact with people at home. I want the turmoil to end quickly.
A rally was also held in Japan to protest against military rule in Myanmar. About 300 people from Myanmar and supporters gathered in front of Japan's foreign ministry in Tokyo. They urged Japan's government to strengthen efforts to democratize their country.
The Myanmar military holds so much power right now. If the Japanese government and the international community don't put pressure on them, the violence will escalate in Myanmar, and more people may be displaced.
People from Myanmar living in Japan do not have enough power. We desperately need voices of people from outside Myanmar to help the lives of people and the future of children. Please support us.
The Japanese government is exempting hundreds of foreign students from an entry ban imposed since late November. More than 100,000 others remain locked out of the country. Education Ministry officials say about 400 can now come to study because it serves the public interest and is a matter of urgency. 87 foreign students with Japanese government scholarships have already been exempted. Authorities imposed the ban, which effectively blocks new entry to foreigners, in light of the Omicron coronavirus variant. It's scheduled to run through February. Scholars and students have been urging the government to ease the restriction. Officials across Japan confirmed over 80,000 new coronavirus infections on Tuesday. 804 people are in serious condition, up 21 from Monday. Tokyo reported more than 14,000 new cases. The occupancy rate of hospital beds for coronavirus patients in the capital now exceeds 50%. That's the threshold at which Tokyo officials said last month they would consider asking the central government to declare a state of emergency. On Monday, Governor Koike Yuriko said she will also take other factors into account, such as the occupancy rate for severely ill patients. NHK has learned that China appears to be refurbishing naval vessels to convert them into Coast Guard ships. An expert points out that China's Coast Guard ships are becoming larger and more heavily armed. Sources say that 12 Chinese Navy frigates are being renovated at several shipbuilding sites in China and could soon be deployed by the China Coast Guard. Sources say China is likely planning to convert more than 20 vessels in all. Analyses show that while the frigates' missiles have been removed, their guns and fire control radar remain intact. The 76-millimeter guns found on the ships can fire about 100 shells in a minute with a range of as much as 16 kilometers. Similar conversions have been confirmed in the past. China's Coast Guard was placed under military command in 2018. A law authorizing the Coast Guard to fire on foreign ships in waters China considers to be under its jurisdiction took effect in February last year. Japan confirmed 34 cases last year in which China Coast Guard ships entered Japanese territorial waters around the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea. Japan controls the islands. The Japanese government maintains the islands are an inherent part of Japan's territory. China and Taiwan claim them. Lawmakers in Japan are taking a united front over the human rights situation in China. Just days ahead of the Beijing Winter Olympics, they've adopted a resolution expressing serious concern. They passed it on Tuesday with a majority vote in the lower house. The resolution refers to areas including the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region and the Tibet Autonomous Region. It also mentions forced incarceration and infringements on religion. At the same time, it does not directly mention China or use the term human rights abuses. Japan's foreign minister is stressing the need for more international cooperation.
Based on the purpose of the resolution, we will continue working closely with the global community to firmly address this matter.
Countries, including the United States, have announced diplomatic boycotts of the Beijing Winter Olympics, citing alleged human rights abuses. The games kick off on Friday. Centuries ago, Japan was a major producer of gold. It mostly came from one island, where to this day the mines are remarkably intact. Government officials want to give them new value as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. They filed their application on Tuesday. The Sado complex of heritage mines is located on Sado Island in the Sea of Japan. There are also villages from several eras, some dating back more than 400 years. But South Korea is against the nomination. Officials say people from the Korean peninsula were forced to work there during World War II. Japanese officials plan to hold consultations to explain their stance in line with UNESCO guidelines. The World Heritage Committee is expected to make a decision next year. The two-person crew of a Japan Air Self-Defense Force F-15 fighter jet remains unaccounted for. Their plane is believed to have crashed into the Sea of Japan on Monday. This footage shows a fighter jet believed to be the plane that is now missing. The jet dropped off radar shortly after taking off from Komatsu Air Base in Ishikawa Prefecture, central Japan. Parts of the aircraft were later found in the sea. The Air Self-Defense Force says the crew members are Colonel Tanaka Koji and Captain Ueta Ryusei. Colonel Tanaka is the commander of the Tactical Fighter Training Group and has served as the leader of the ASDF Blue Impulse aerobatic team. The ASDF says the craft was among the 4 F-15s taking part in a training session on the day. It also says that shortly after the jet took off, an air traffic controller at the base spotted an orange light in the direction the plane was headed. Base officials say they then tried but failed to make contact with the crew and did not receive any bailout distress signal. Parts of Brazil are dealing with heavy rainfall leading to deadly flooding. Our meteorologist Sayaka Mori has a look at the situation in world weather.
Hello there. Seasonal rain, possibly worsened by La Nina, has caused floods and landslides over the state of Sao Paulo, killing at least 21 people. Sao Paulo had 382 millimeters of rain in January. That's the heaviest since 2017. Take a look at this video from the area. 27 municipalities in the state of Sao Paulo have been affected by heavy rain since Friday. The torrential rains caused floods and landslides, affecting over 1,500 families. Governor of the state has released more than $40 million for emergency aid. Brazil has been severely affected by heavy rain since December. It looks like more rain is in the forecast. It looks like the heaviest rain will pound a little bit towards the east of Sao Paulo, but parts of central Brazil could see an additional 300 millimeters of rain into the next 2 days or so. Temperatures are going to be as follows. Asunción will remain on the hot side with a high of 38 degrees on your Wednesday. It's going to be cooler in La Paz with a high of 11. Buenos Aires could see a chance for thunderstorms. Meanwhile, we talked about Cyclone Ana, which made landfall in Madagascar and Mozambique last week. Many people have been killed in southern Africa. But another cyclone is on its way to affect the similar places that were battered by Tropical Cyclone Ana. This system will likely intensify and it could hit Madagascar during the weekend. Meanwhile, monsoon showers are affecting parts of northern areas of Australia. Broome had 564 millimeters of rain in 48 hours. More rain is in the forecast. It was exceptionally dry over the South Island of New Zealand, but February is a different story. An additional 700 millimeters of rain is possible for the next 2 days or so. Temperatures are going to be as follows on your Wednesday. That's it from me. Have a nice day.